And that data comes from the deep understanding of what you have there. There's a big difference. And where a lot of these projects fail is when you don't have that analysis and you don't really understand what you're dealing with. You can end
that's
up
the
with a
key.
lot of technical debt that you haven't planned for. And
Give,
quite
give
often
me an
that technical
example.
debt.
Give me an example of technical debt. If you're doing, let's say, a SharePoint, a migration, what do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm talking about things like where you have data that flows across applications. So this is one of the really good features of Domino, that Domino apps can talk to Domino apps, right? So typically, in my experience, you'd have lots of dependent and integrated apps. So when you remove one of those Jenga blocks, if you want to put it like that, if you remove it in the wrong way, the whole tower can come crashing down, and that's your technical debt. So what I'm referring to there is, if let's say you're sharing some data across applications, you then move that onto SharePoint, Microsoft 365, you're talking about one platform that is hosted in the cloud, one platform that's hosted on premise, and there's no native connectors there in Domino to actually connect those two platforms. So you've got some technical debt, you have to create some APIs potentially. And then you've got lots of complex things to deal with. Do you need VPN tunnels because one's in the cloud and one's on premise, that kind of thing. And this technical debt just stacks up to the point where, in my experience, you throw in the towel. It's too
Well,
much technical debt.
you get that discussion, right? I thought you told me
Yeah.
you could migrate this thing in a year for £1 million or dollars or whatever, right? And then everybody just starts pointing fingers because nobody really initially figured out what it really requires to move all of the
Yeah.
applications, not just the simple ones.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. And it comes back to that point that I made earlier on about knowing how to deconstruct your domino estate, if you want to call it that. And the only way you know how to do that is if you really understand what you have and how you understand the architecture and how it all fits together. And believe it or not, Henry, I've seen a lot of projects where they're trying to do this kind of thing, but without involving Domino people. So I was involved in a project. This is a migration to Dynamics 365. And they had a solution architect from a managed service company. And don't get me wrong, this guy was absolutely brilliant, but he didn't know Domino. So he wasn't aware of all of the intricacies of how the applications talk to each other and where the dependencies were. And that's why they pulled me into the project, to analyze all of that and give them an idea of where all of that technical debt was. But this is in the middle of the project. This wasn't from the outset.
I think the analogy would be something like they're climbing Mount Everest, don't have a map, and suddenly they call for a Sherpa to be dropped off in a helicopter because they're freezing and they're lost, and that's you, right? Try to guide them through the process. And
Yeah, that's right.
unfortunately,
That's a good
uh,
analogy, actually. I like that. Yeah.
unfortunately, I see that over and over again. This is why, for the last 20 years, people have been trying to get off, literally trying to get off,
Yep.
and that's why they're all frustrated because they can't. Even HCL themselves are saying, yeah, there is a huge customer base which is extremely dissatisfied. They want to get off, and that's why they have the whole Volt MX strategy to be able to help them, which I tend to agree with. But at the end of the day, it's a very bottled up, frustrated market that really needs help getting off the platform completely.